how do you navigate that? And it feels overwhelming at first, but it's incredible, like the growth that you can get by grabbing those uncomfortable opportunities that they feel at first is just it the breadth and depth of learning that I've taken away in the last 5 years is second to none. I've really enjoyed that.
Well, hello and welcome to another Hiring Excellence podcast. I'm Johnny Campbell, your host for today, the CEO and co-founder of Social Talent. And today on the show, I'm delighted to welcome somebody who's, nearly had as long in recruiting as me, which is getting scary now. But we're young people. Let's pretend we are at the very least guest before you come on. And, coming from an agency background, as I did, our guest has moved through from agency exec search, touching on RPO, been heavily involved in many of the vendors in our space since her early career, and ended up in-house in a really growing company that had a lot of change going on over the last few years. And this is somebody who's embraced that change and wants to share the story of why this is a transformational moment in TA, how she worked through that change in her previous organization, and is going to hopefully share some tips with you, the audience member, on how to cope with similar changes you might be going through. Laura, it's great to have you on the show. So Laura Le Masurier is joining us as somebody who spent, dare I say, nearly 20 years in the recruiting world, which is, as I said, about the same as I spent in this crazy industry, and has worked in the weird world of satellites and recruiting for what I would call a niche or niche industry, but actually one that literally is all around us. Heavy technical stuff, embracing technical change, difficult hiring volumes as well. And you've worked in that space for quite some time, a thread that perhaps takes you from agency to corporates. So I'm dying to hear that story, but maybe first, Laura, you might tell our audience a little bit about yourself, where you're joining us from, what makes you tick, and then maybe start where you think is most appropriate to start in your career.
Sure. Well, Johnny, thank you so much for having me on. Very excited to be here. So I'm Laura. I live in Cornwall, Southwest UK. I moved here, as many did, during lockdown, but I'm one of the people that have stayed down here. And a big draw for that, we have a young family, dog, cats. We wanted a little bit more space, and my husband and I share a common hobby, which is surfing. And we have that on the doorstep here. So it's been a really exciting 5 years. I have my youngest is 5 years old. So we moved when he was just born. And then my oldest has just started senior school. So we're just navigating him coming home, asking to go round somebody's house whom I've never met, and, trying to navigate how to handle that. So very busy household. Really love to be outside. We all do. We love to cook. We love music, and very, very sporty. So I think that's, in a nutshell, that's a little bit about us, or me and my family. And then in terms of my recruitment career, unsurprisingly, I fell into recruitment. I guess most of us do. But I worked. My career started in Miss Selfridge. I don't know if you remember. You're probably far too young. Remember the retail store?
I know Miss Selfridge, yeah.
Yeah, I used to work in there whilst I was at college, and I used to just love upselling the cards that people used to get with the credit and everything like that. And I used to win some of the awards, and that really sparked an interest for me in sales. So my first sort of major role was at L'Oreal, and I worked for one of their brands, and I started in sales and moved into marketing, during which time we often had periods where we needed temporary staff to come and help. So I had a relationship with a recruitment agency who I got to know very, very well and met a few times, and it always sounded quite exciting. I always enjoyed hearing about all of the stories that they would tell me, the different clients that they worked with. And then I had a little break to go traveling. I went off to Australia, Thailand, Cambodia, really, really good fun, just by myself for about a year and a half. And then when I came back, I called that recruitment company to help me find work. And then they said, you know what, we think you could be quite a good consultant. Why don't you give it a whirl? And I did. And that's where I started. That was back in 2006. So yeah, I'm
Right.
entering my 20th year.
And did you start doing retail recruiting, Laura, or what area did you fall straight into? Or did you do a few different things for the first few years?
Yeah, I started a contractor desk, and I did a lot of FMCG, investment banking. So
Mm,
I worked heavily with investment banks, actually, just helping them to find mainly sort of administrative roles. Also did a lot in the translation space, and finding candidates with language skills to go and work across a real plethora, actually, of clients. I didn't specialize at that time. That came a little bit later. I took a move from, I was in London. I took a move from London to Brighton, and joined a recruitment agency specializing in grad programs. And that's where I sort of started to specialize, and I moved into the FMCG space, and helped companies to find their graduates. A lot of them had needed language skills again, and I had that experience previously. So that was really fun. I did that um, for a while, and I hadn't got the traveling out of my system. So I I did a surf trip over to Central America and did that for a year. And then when I came back, that's when I was really ready
mm,
to settle down. And I found an agency in Brighton, a boutique firm that specialize in a lot, or not a lot, but a few select industries, of which one was space and satellite, something that had always fascinated me. And I got the role, and it was completely different. That's where I moved into executive search, and it really broadened me, I would say, because I had that opportunity back then. So it's almost 20 years ago. There weren't so many players in space. There weren't very
mm.
many recruiters specializing in the industry. There were a handful of us. I could count on one hand how many of us were doing it globally, you know. So we had very solid relationships with the larger companies, and over time it's it's an industry that's so exciting. It evolves with such rapidity. There is so much change, and you have to be ahead of the game. You have to think strategically about what's going to be coming along. At one point, satellites, you know, they were up there for 15, 20 years, and it would take us a really long time to build a new one. You had time, but now we've got Leo constellations. So the market moved really quickly, and we had to adjust and pivot. So I really enjoyed being an executive search and specializing. I think that was really a pivotal moment for me, was specializing in the space industry and learning that area.
So, do you mind educating me and our audience just a little bit for a second about that space industry, right? So, immediately what comes to mind is you're hiring astronauts, which I know you're not, okay? But what kind of technical skills do you hire, or really walking through the changes if it's changed? Like, what are the kind of people? Who are the players? Is it a very global kind of industry where people move countries all the time? Is there a small couple of places in the world where all this stuff happens? Give us an overview of that industry.
Yeah, it's truly global, and I'd say in the beginning it was pretty incestuous, because there were four major players at the time. You had SES, you had Inmarsat, Intelsat, you had Eutelsat, and then lots of other companies as well as those folks. So the talent market was quite insular, and it it needed an evolution. There weren't so many specific, you know, satellite communications. That's the area that I started to specialize in. So if you think about the way that we communicate, there's three different types of satellites. There's different orbits. There's a geostationary orbit, and then there's a medium Earth orbit, and then there's a low Earth orbit. So you've seen newer players coming in more recently, and notoriously, you would know Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have entered with Starlink and Kuiper, offering services. So it's an incredibly competitive area. You have people all over the world wanting to be a part of the space industry. You have people fighting. There is a war across talent to get those skills in, because you take something like the regulatory side and there's not so many people. So we're always looking for software engineers, software developers. You're looking for just evolving technology. So a lot of AI, a lot of cloud, a lot of 5G, 6G. We're looking at highly technical profiles. You're looking at satellite engineers. These are folks that build, the ground station, that understand the space segment. How does the satellite communicate with the ground, and how do you build out that infrastructure safely? How do you build out the operations? So it's really exciting. And I think what has sort of kept me in the industry is the way in which it moves. And I would say certainly over the last 5 years or so, with players like Kuiper and Starlink coming into the mix, we've seen a lot of industry consolidation. We're looking at companies that have to change. There is a call to change. And what's been exciting from a talent point of view is being able to move the barriers a little, remove the barriers a little bit, and look at different industries and bring difference in, because there's not enough people with all of the talent, on paper. So you have to ditch a job description. You have to start thinking about what are the skills or what are the talents that we need to bring in, and where can we get them from? Like if you take Formula One, for example, they're dealing with telemetry very, very quickly to make data-driven decisions very fast before the driver will go out of the pit. And it's not so different with a satellite. We're having to make a lot of decisions very quickly using data. So we're also looking for companies where they've built something from scratch, and they've got a product or a service that's been created. Who else has done that really well? There's a lot in the telco industry or pharma industry even. How can we bring that kind of difference into industry? So it really does evolve very quickly, and you have to be incredibly creative and in tune with the market and where that's going to be successful.
Arguably, you were all skills first before anyone was talking about skills first, because you had to think not about just the competitor and hiring their staff. You had to think about, to your point, related industries, scenarios where the skills would come together, types of companies that would have those skills, really kind of thinking outside the box. It's funny, you mentioned the kind of competitors in this space, and we're going to get on and talk about your employer, recent employer, SES, in a second. But I know that, in that space, the likes of Inmarsat were known to me and probably most of our listeners through the likes of the MH370 flight, which went missing over the Pacific, over Indian Ocean, and eventually was never found. But the whole controversy around Inmarsat, being brought in around pinging the satellites and everything else, and probably brought that world of satellites to consumer a few years ago. But you're right, like some Musk and Bezos maybe making it more real for people today, with all this talk about this lower orbit satellites as well. But you did end up going to work for one of your customers, and you've been there for actually a number of years up until very, very recently. Laura, talk me through that work. What led you in-house? Was it a conscious decision, or was it again more accidental?
Yeah, I think so. I've always been in awe of SES as a company. I've always found them incredibly dynamic, incredibly driven, forward thinking. And I recruited for SES from about 2012, and at the same time O3B, who they later bought. And it was really interesting, because the SES side of the business was really broadcast oriented. That was a major and still remains a major area for them. And then the O3B side of the business, the personal opinion, I always found to be quite entrepreneurial. They were, breaking things and doing things differently. And they launched the MEO constellation, and it was incredibly groundbreaking. So to see the two of them consolidate in 2017, having worked with them, O3B from the beginning, and having worked with SES for a long time, was was really exciting to me. They had always been a client I remained really close with, and going to all of the different satellite and space shows. I had networked from grassroots up to their C-suite, and really always sort of understood the market and what they were trying to accomplish. And I mentioned earlier I moved down to Cornwall during lockdown, and my previous role had been in Brighton, so I was moving hundreds of miles away, and I took the decision at that point to do something completely on my own. And then as I reached out to clients, SES were in a phenomenal growth phase, and they needed help, and it was natural to sort of move there. And that's when that sparked me as well to consider what I would want to do in the future and where I wanted to concentrate. And for me, I've always been really interested in the talent ecosystem as a whole. And the piece that was missing really was that in-house bit. What sometimes you could be met with resistance and you wouldn't quite understand why, or there would be parts that they could not discuss with you, or you'd be talking to the C-suite and it could feel disconnected. I wanted to go in-house to understand, how does it all piece together, and what's it like for in-house folk? What's that difference? So it was really attractive to me. So I started with them just as a consultant, just supporting them on the recruitment side. And I mentioned they were in a real growth phase, but when I got in there, it was that I just saw opportunity at that time. They didn't have or they had quite a big team, but everybody had about 45 or 50 roles that they were working without specialization. Every single recruiter worked in a different way, and every hiring manager expected them to work the way that they wanted them to. And I found that really fascinating, to sort of see the workings and see that actually it's quite different. I had always made the assumption that it would be quite standardized and quite different, I guess, from how it was. So I just saw a really good opportunity, and our leader, the team leader of TA, had at that time stepped down, and the CHRO came in and was asking us how things were. And I just on that Teams call, it was the first time that we had spoken, and I just said, it feels like it could be better. And we started having this conversation, and then I just saw an opportunity to maybe go from that call and create a business plan to show them how I would look at that function, how, like, the changes that I would like to implement and what could be achieved in terms of success from that. And that's what sort of moved me from the consultant into the full-time employee role a little later.
And so give us some numbers in terms of, at the time, how big was the company? How many were recruiting? You mentioned about 45 recs each. Many locations were they recruiting for? So give us a bit of a sense of size of team, volume of recruiting, etc. at the time, and then maybe we'll talk about how that evolved.
Yeah, so we had around over 2,000 people globally, with main hubs in Luxembourg, in Washington, DC, and then in Manassas over in Virginia. Then we had hubs as well over in Southeast Asia. We had them in the Middle East, Netherlands, Germany, UK. So truly global, a lot in Africa as well. And there is naturally different legislation in the way that you could recruit, but there didn't seem to be a sort of single point of contact with that knowledge. And like I say, every sort of area was a little bit different. The team, when I joined, was about 8 people, and there was one of those people who was doing a little bit of a dual role at the time. I've always really enjoyed that with SES. They're very, very forward thinking in terms of dual roles and giving people opportunity to go and do projects as well. And she did the EVP for us and the sort of brand side, and then she also supported on recruitment. But the rest were 360 recruiters. And it was a very busy year. We hired maybe around 600 people, but there was a huge backlog where the recruiters had just not had the time that they needed. They couldn't be proactive because the
Mm.
volume kept on coming. So it was a little bit broken. And I took the whole of the process and broke it down and understood who are all of the stakeholders. So I mapped them all out, because it took me a little while to actually even understand where I had to go to get the different pieces I needed just to recruit someone. And something like 16 systems I had to go through. And everybody had a different pain point. So that was really kind of where I started, was mapping out the stakeholders and mapping out the process and looking at the data points that I could take back to the SLT to show them what the recruiter load was, where we are being held up, where we could have optimization and automation, and actually the structure of the team, how that could better support the business. So it was an opportunity really to create change in a very busy time for them, of scale.
And Laura, did they even have a recruitment software? Did they have any form of reporting from recruitment, or how did it work?
Yeah, so they use success factors, and weren't getting the most out of it. It is an intelligent platform. There was some sort of basic reporting, but nobody. It felt like the reports were just there. There wasn't really any kind of accountability, or were they tracking the things that were right for the business? What was important to the business? So again, that was an opportunity. When I mapped those stakeholders, I had individual meetings with each of them, and I proactively went to people that had been quite challenging, in terms of what their expectations is versus what we could deliver, to really understand their worldview. What is it they need from us? What's working? What's not? Stop, start, continue. And I did that through lots of individual meetings, and then with the process, I cut that up and looked at how much time, and proportionally where are recruiters spending their time. What's the hiring process like? And every single one was different, but the one kind of key piece of data that I captured was that the recruiters were spending 40 hours a month just on admin. They were saying yes to everything. They weren't using data. They weren't showing the story. They weren't working in the same way. So it was good to be able to kind of to pull that. And I looked at their time to hire, their time to fill. Nobody at that point had looked at the cost per hire, so I started to look at that. And then I brought all of the data and the story together. None of the recruitment team had been trained. They hadn't ever used social talent or any other platforms. So I just brought a business case together, and from there they said, this is exciting, maybe go and look at a framework that you would create. So I went back to those stakeholders, got a working group together, went with my first, the time zero through to hire, and all of the different phases that needed to go, all of the different stakeholders, what their role was during that sort of period, and their accountability, and what happens with the if scenarios. What happens if a hiring manager doesn't get back to us? What's the consequence? Let's create some SLAs. Let's think about that. And
Mm.
together we iterated it. So I think it was a very cohesive process. It took a little while, but by the end of it, we were true allies. So we were
Mm.
able then to go to SLT and say, this is the current recruiter load. This is the current team setup. This is the current cost per hire. This is the cost for the team. This is where we're recruiting. These are our trends. These are the hardest skill sets that we're looking for. This is where we're getting attrition. Here's the solution. This is where we should be. This is how it's set up. And this is how we could be set up better according to the business strategy and location strategy that we have ahead of us. And and it was listened to. We got that seat at the table, and a huge help to me was the social talent platform at that point, because there was such an educational piece that needed to happen, not just among consultants, but with hiring managers, to help them understand how proactive they could be, and what standardization could mean for the company, and changing somebody's mindset from, okay, I need to do 25 interviews and I need to know what they eat for breakfast, to, okay, we're going to go on a very, very structured journey. We're going to have, score sheets. We're going to do a panel interview. So that took time, but things like creating badge learning for hiring managers and creating a talent hub for them to be able to go in and to have a repository of, tasks that they could give to candidates to bring to a panel interview. It took a while, but we managed to reduce the time to hire from around 175 days right down to 54. It really, in a short space of time. And it was, yeah, it was incredible. It was such a great journey to be on, and just having everybody working cohesively together. I'm really proud of that. I really enjoyed it.
And can I ask you, did you do this by tripling the budget, just throwing money at the problem, or what were the secrets to actually getting that kind of a transformation?
I think the secrets there were to, and also, if you need to go get budget, is to show them what you need. Because I think in a lot of companies, it's not unusual for SLT to have, they've thought long and hard about their strategy, but when it comes to talent attraction, it's a case of, okay, we're going to need 45 people over here, and we need them now. But without the understanding of what that takes, what does it take to get 45 people in a month? And what happens if we need 45 people one month, but then the next month we only need 15? Next month we need 200. So it was around that recruiter load, and showing them what worked really well. And for us, it was 15 to 20 requisitions, and then doing some calculations to say, if you want us to fill 80% of these roles, this is the base team that I need, and these are the roles that they need to play, and this is how they will interact with one another. And if we're looking from a budget perspective, these are the locations in which we should house these people. These are the gaps that we have on the team currently. I looked at all of the platforms. I went to them with an ask for a budget, but equally with where we could save. Automation, optimization, platforms. What don't we need? What can we get rid of? What is critical? What's crucial for us to win? And what's the contingency for those? It can be tumultuous. It can really change in terms of what's needed in an area. How do we navigate that safely? Are we reliant on consultants? Are we reliant on external agencies? If so, who are they, and how can we optimize that relationship? So it wasn't about budgets. Or I think everybody is feeling the same pressure, right? They're getting smaller. They want you to do more with less, and it's so exciting. At first it feels overwhelming that your budget could get halved, maybe even more, and the volume remains the same. But that's where technology, AI, digitization, looking at skills, looking at the talent that you need, is really incredible. It's so powerful to start looking at that and seeing how you can streamline your processes, how you can implement AI to support your process and your workflows, and actually learning from your SLT and from your excos and non-cos. What do they want to see? What's important to them? And how can I show that graphically with data, but with a story to go around it, so that they really understand when I come out of that meeting with them what it takes. And I think that's been quite key. It's been a huge learning curve for me over the last 5 years.
So if I can kind of summarize some of those big points, Laura, right? You talked us through, obviously, the importance of, first of all, just kind of assessing what you have, what you're trying to optimize for, gathering the data, right? So that's kind of really important. We hear this a lot on the show, where you need to sometimes take time without making change, just to see, what have I got? get your, we've talked to leaders who talk about having no reporting, saying, I need reporting first because I've no idea where the problem is. I've no idea which area we should focus on. So that assessment is really important. The alignment then with the SLT obviously is part of that. Which bleeds into your business case piece. Don't ask for money without understanding the why, connecting the dots, and showing that you are obviously making changes yourself to drive efficiency. Maybe being the third point in terms of looking at the workflows, looking at optimization where you have waste, the importance of standardization. You mentioned early AI use cases in there as well. Um, but, but 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 what about kind of areas around the workforce planning? Is it predictable? Were you able to kind of pretty much well understand that? Because we haven't mentioned some of the bigger changes, because the organization wasn't just keeping the same old stuff going through all this transition. There was a lot of background change in terms of people leaving roles, the organization expanding, acquisitions. Talk me through some of that and how that impacted all of this stuff you're trying to do.
Yes, I say the last 2 years have been fundamental for the successful integration between SES and Intelsat, and a lot of that was the planning phases. So it was about considering the processes, the policies. We wanted to move to become a much more agile company. So it was an opportunity to assess. It really gave us permission, I would say, to think differently. What could we change? And so much work went into that pre-integration, where we really worked hard. From an SES perspective, we held interviews not only internally but actually externally as well, looking at what other companies were doing. How have they navigated that change? What are my peers in TA doing? What are they seeing in the market? How did they adopt AI? What's worked? What were they learning? So really taking that time to sort of build that map and understand. If I look, doing side by sides as well, once you integrate, to see like, what are the policies and the processes on this side versus this side? What's new now that we're double the size of the company? What's the strategy over the next 5 years? And where are we with our people? How do we understand what our people's capabilities are? What are the fundamental skills that you need in the new co? And do they marry up with what we already have, or is it something different? So it really, it was very explorative. It was very important to take the time to understand where the strengths are in both companies, and both are absolutely fantastic, right, at what they do. So there was a lot of opportunity there to build something special. But looking at the future and looking at us as a company needing to move forward and think about the way that we do business and our differentiators, with customer centricity underpinning all of that. From a talent perspective, my role was to understand what's going to be needed and what would make us better. And there's a lot of different, for example, AI platforms out there. Which one is going to suit the needs of our business? We've already got success factors. Do I look at one that just combines nicely with success factors? Do we want to do something completely different? So many hours were poured into that. I did a lot as well around with the two companies, executive leadership. Did a lot of work on that piece for the two companies to help with the leadership selection. We also did a huge project of shoring. We did a lot of work over in Chennai, so I helped set that office up from scratch from a recruitment perspective, hiring in a team. And within we had some pretty heavy targets set by our CEO, but we met those, and we exceeded them. And there's a huge community now over in India, and it's really exciting to sort of be able to embrace so many different opportunities during these times of change, which can feel, I do remember feeling, it's almost like imposter syndrome when they said, okay, well, you need to look at us when we're going to build in India. How do we do that? And I've built and scaled teams all over the globe. I hadn't done it there. That was a new area for me. And how do you navigate that? And it feels overwhelming at first, but it's incredible, like the growth that you can get by grabbing those uncomfortable opportunities that they feel at first is just it the breadth and depth of learning that I've taken away in the last 5 years is second to none. I've really enjoyed that, and other opportunities as well. Talking to nomination committees and understanding what their expectations are, which they don't always marry up with the SLT, and so seeing how they navigate that and how they come to agreement, and then how can I facilitate the talent that they need into that, and what's important for them to know, around topics like belonging. What are they going to be interested in? So it's a very strategic place to be, and you have to be very results driven. You have to measure at every stage what success looks like, and understand what are the small goals and how do we get there.
Laura, through all this, we've talked about the fact that you mentioned at the start, moved hundreds of miles away from your home, start of COVID, second child, all these different challenges. And unless it maybe isn't clear to folks, this required you putting in an enormous amount of hours and work in as well. This wasn't a 9 to 5 job anywhere near it over the last 5 years. And as you said, 2 years ago, doubling the size of the company, acquisition, more challenges, as you said, you embraced them, and got it, I think, to a place where you feel it's really on a good footing now. But you decided late last year that it was time perhaps to step back from that. Again, on very, very good terms. Talk me through that. Talk me through the logic, and then talk me through what's next for you.
Yeah, I think I was just so tired. It had been, like you say, it had been such a transformative phase. During my tenure, there were four different CEOs. There were three different CEOs. Sorry, there were four different CPOs. So everybody comes in. There's a lot of change that happens. Was I'm really driven, I'm really ambitious, and I want to do as many things as I can. And I love to problem solve. So it's quite organic for me to ask for those stretch projects. And there's so much opportunity within that company. And they're just moving at such pace, which I love, and such urgency. But after 5 years of, doing those 60 hours often, and traveling and growing, I just felt that I needed to actually take time to decompress and consider the learnings that I have taken on. I went into SES, as mentioned earlier, with intention. I wanted to understand the full life cycle of recruitment, and the piece that was missing for me was the in-house piece. So I wanted to gain that knowledge and understand the views from inside a company as well, to help me on the outside. So it was a perfect time for me. We had gotten through the integration. We built a world-class team. We were ready with what we needed to do to improve our process and optimize, and the digitization piece. And the team were at a very, very sort of good place for me to be able to comfortably exit. And just navigating those conversations, it was sad. It was really like I say, I've been really close to that company since 2012. They feel like part of my life. I'm so excited for them in the future. It's not to say I won't ever work with them again. I really hope I do. I'm excited, but I wanted to just take some time to think about what's next for me. And I really am excited for my future. I feel like I've gained, not dissimilar to yourself, like so many different angles. I understand what companies are looking for, whether they are startups, whether they're really well established and in absolute chaos, whether they're a company that wants to deploy AI or digitize, but they don't know where to start in talent. And that's really what I would like to do, is to take this pause, and then in Q2 in 2026, that's when I'll be looking to go and support companies to change their talent methodologies and help them with their talent strategy.
And tell me this, Laura, what do you think are going to be some of the biggest challenges we're going to face as an industry for TA leaders over the next 6 months, 2 years, 4 years? What do you think those challenges are? And what are your tips at a high level for leaders who are facing into those challenges today?
I would say there's still many companies that haven't embraced AI or digitization of their HR processes, talent being at the heart of that, and not knowing where to start. Just topics like an internal talent space where you can load up your projects and you can you can create a community where folks can learn. They are going to be huge. The rate at which AI is moving and changing the landscape in which we work. It's changing a lot of the roles that we do. So it's understanding that balance, and as well, if you look at the recruitment process, where is it good to have AI? Where do you need to have that human perspective? Where can we optimize? What makes sense to optimize? And then another one that comes up a lot is skills based. And I think that there's a lot of kind of chatter around that, some positive, some negative, but I think that it's not so much looking at the skills, it's more around the talents. I think that if you're not close enough with your SLT and your nomination committees, your REM committees, and you don't understand where the business needs to go, and you haven't got a basis of what those foundational skills are that you need, then you're going to be in trouble. So I think it's about looking at how you can utilize the incredible talents you already have within your company and creating spaces for them to get together, and learning opportunities, shadowing opportunities, project, whether that's 50%, 100%, like have that gig space for them, have the ability to go back and look at, rather than looking at a job description, what's needed. Our company, or the last company I worked at, was so incredibly agile. Should everybody go through the project manager course? Just things like that. What's fundamental to success for the company in 5 years? It's about, no one's brilliant at workforce planning, at least no company that I've kind of engaged with. So how, again, that's going to be another one with AI coming in. How will the landscape change within businesses, and how can your talent functions support that? I think it's all going to be future oriented.
So, Laura, it sounds like you're positioning yourself as a potential solution for some of these businesses, someone who can help share your experience, your wide breadth of knowledge. If anyone's listening to this thinking, there's a woman whose brain I need to pick, I need to get Laura's opinion, whether it's just an email, jump on a Teams call, or maybe an engagement from Q2, what's the best way that folks can reach out to you and find you?
So always hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm incredibly active on there. So it's Laura Le Masurier. Just find me on LinkedIn, drop me a message, and I will come back to you and we can connect. I'm always just so excited, even just to listen. I'd love to know what you're doing around the topics we've discussed, and certainly if I can help as well.
And surfing advice is also being offered too, I believe. Is that correct, Laura?
I would say definitely not, honestly.
Well, Laura, it's been an absolute pleasure again to chat with you, to hear the story, to dig into a unique industry I knew nothing about, and to really kind of understand that whilst the industry's changed, the roles are different, the problems and the challenges and the opportunities are often the same for those of us working in the TA space. And to your point, it's one to embrace. There's a right way, there's a wrong way. Standardization across processes always wins. Making sure you have the right metrics, building business cases. There's so much that's timely and timeless here in the lessons you're sharing with us, Laura. So really appreciate you taking the time out, and hoping to catch up on that journey and get a surfing lesson next time it's a bit warmer in the seas by Cornwall and passing by. Thanks for joining us, Laura.
Thank you, you bet. Great to see you.
Good to see you. And thank you for joining us as well for another great Hiring Excellence podcast. We'll be back next week with another fantastic guest. Don't forget, if you have a story to tell, don't forget to reach out to the show. You can reach out to Johnny@socialtalent.com. And of course, we'll link to Laura's LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Until next week, take care.